This video is an attempt to explain, from one Jew's perspective anyway, the basic issues about Palestinian refugees and why the world should not continue to allow this discussion about whether all Palestinians who claim that they grew up in some house in Haifa should be able to return. And I'd offer 7 reasons. Number 1, many of the people that claim to be Palestinians who directly descended from a house in Tel Aviv or Haifa or Jaffa, simply untrue. We have empirical evidence that suggests and proves that most of the people who claim this actually lived in other Arab nations and flooded the area during the 1948 period and immediately thereafter. Number 2, there is no example in history of anybody who's been able to return to their native home in that way after they left, especially when their side started a war. Number 3, 750,000 Jews were expelled from Arab nations with no compensation, and they didn't ask their permission to expel them between 1948 and 1950, and most of them went to Israel. There was never any compensation, and they were just kicked out. And they know that Israel is their homeland, and that's where the Jews belong. In the same way that Palestine should be the homeland for all Palestinian refugees, and that's where they should go, and not back to any supposed house they had in Haifa. 4, Jews were kicked out of Israel, out of many homes. That homes don't exist anymore because it was 2,000 years ago and 1,500 years ago. But they were there originally, and there was never any compensation. In fact, Jews were kicked out of every country of Europe at some point in the Middle Ages without any compensation. And the Jews were expelled from their homes by the millions and during the Holocaust in Europe, and many died, but some are left now. Some are getting a little bit of compensation 60 years later, but they're not getting their homes back. It's simply not the way it ever happens. 5, the Arabs started this fight. In 1947, the UN voted to partition Palestine into a Jewish and Palestinian state. The Jews voted yes, and the Arabs voted to kill every Jew in Israel and started a war. And they told the Arabs to leave their homes, and that they said it will be able to kill the Jews easier, and when they're all dead, you can come back and claim your home. The Arabs started this. They shouldn't be rewarded now. And it's disgusting what the Arabs did with the Palestinians who were in those refugee camps. They kept them in camps still to this day. They controlled the whole area of the West Bank between 1948 and 1967. Jordan did, and didn't do one thing to help the Palestinian refugees, and neither have the countries in the meantime. They're just using that as some kind of bargaining wedge for propaganda purposes against the Jews. Number 6, the UN voted to have one little tiny Jewish state. 10 of those little states could fit in the state of Illinois. There are 21 Arab countries right now, and as soon as the Arabs get their act together and agree to have peace with Israel, there'll be a 22nd, the Palestinian state, besides the 40 or so nations with many Muslim significant populations. So there's not room for one tiny little Jewish place, in a place where God promised our ancestors that the Jews would have this land? There has to be. But if you say that we should let in millions of people that weren't even born there, most of them, into that land, it won't be a Jewish state anymore. It would undermine the whole idea of a Jewish homeland. And so, finally, the simple proposition is this, that Israel should be the homeland for Jewish refugees all over the world. Palestine, if it's created, would be the homeland for Palestinian refugees all over the world, and that's the end of the matter. And you tell me this, when you do poll after poll of Palestinians and discover that the majority encourage suicide bombing and want to kill every Jew they can, why in the world would it be morally okay to suggest that those same people should be allowed to move next door to Israelis and live in an Israeli democracy and let their children go blow up Israelis every day on the buses and in the schools? It's just a ridiculous idea in a very difficult environment. And so the best solution is a Palestinian state, a Jewish state. The refugees throughout the world who want to return to their homeland, go to their homeland, and that is the end of the matter. And that would make a huge stride forward in bringing about a just and lasting peace.